Want to welcome our online viewers. Grateful for all those folks that engage with us through Facebook Live, and also those folks that engage with us afterwards through YouTube as well. Today we begin a brand new series called Hope Has Come, and as I have already said to you today, all of us in this room, perhaps it is even you, know someone who stands in need of hope. They're going through things in their life that just bring about that lack of hope. And all of us know people like that. And so I just want to again encourage you to invite folks to worship where they might hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Today, as we begin, I just want to remind you, really, because this is not a surprise to any of us, that we live in a world that is absolutely dominated by sound and light. It is hard to imagine or hard to get a moment of silence in the world in which we live. We live in a 24/7, 365-degree world, constantly online. We live in the world of internet and cell phones that leave us constantly connected. We also live in a world of things like 24-hour news networks. Who would have ever thought that there would be 24 hours worth of news that we needed to see? There are countless TV channels, and there is the always-on-demand streaming TV. Now, there are a few of us in this room that can remember a day and a time when there were no more than the number of fingers that you have on your hand, the number of TV channels that you could watch. And there are those of us in the room that can remember that not only were there only about 4 or 5 or 6 TV channels, but at midnight, of all things, they went off the air. At midnight, they would play the Star-Spangled Banner, and then nothing. Those days are long gone. There is rarely a time in our day and our life that we do not encounter noise of some kind. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a reality of the world in which we live. When you go into a store, you're going to hear music being played. You get put on hold at the doctor's office, you're going to hear music being played. Even at the gas pumps these days, you can't even pump your gas without music playing or a little TV at the pump playing something for you to listen to while you pump gas. It's hard to find a moment of silence. You need help studying, you need help focusing, or maybe you're having trouble sleeping. Don't worry, Spotify Internet Radio has a playlist for you, because heaven forbid we try and do those things. And silence, and why don't we like silence? Well, silence makes us uncomfortable. In fact, if I were to pause here in my preaching this morning and say for the next 3 minutes, we're going to have a period of silence, after about 30 seconds, most of the people in this room would begin to squirm because we are not comfortable with silence. That kind of silence is actually almost frightening and eerie to us. Similarly, it's hard to find a moment in our life where light does not dominate. It's not available to us at the flip of the switch. It's hard to imagine that. Seldom do we experience total darkness. Even at nighttime, we don't experience total darkness. That kind of darkness is a darkness that you can actually feel. Here is a picture of nighttime in our country, and this is what they referred to as light pollution. If you've never heard that phrase before, light pollution is when there is so much light out in our world that even nighttime doesn't look much like nighttime. And if you know your map at all, that's Florida and the bottom half of the United States at night. It's hard to find a time when we don't have any sound and we don't have any light. But what happens when the darkness and the silence comes in life? What happens when the darkness is not just a time of the day or a weather phenomenon, and when silence that we experience isn't simply because the TV, radio, computer, or phone has gotten turned off or our kids went to bed? How do we navigate life in the midst of silence and darkness? How do we navigate when it seems that even God himself is silent? Well, one of the things that I think that we need to do today as we begin is we just simply need to acknowledge the things that happen in our lives that bring the darkness and the silence. Sometimes those are uncomfortable things to talk about, but if we're going to face them in a way that it brings honor to the Lord, I think we need to be honest about them. We need to be in tune with what goes on in our lives. Sometimes darkness comes because of financial things in our lives. The weight of the financial burden that we face brings a dark cloud to us. There are some people, even here in the city of Ravenna, whom the dark cloud of financial matters has become so large, so dark, that they find themselves homeless. It's a dark cloud. For others, it is the dark cloud of disease and health issues that come into our lives. Sometimes it's the dark cloud of failed relationships. Maybe it's a marriage that has gone bad. Maybe it's dysfunction in your family with your children. Or maybe you as a child experienced that with your own parents. Those are dark clouds that come. Susie referenced it as a part of her Advent reading today, but there are folks for whom this time of year brings a malady called seasonal anxiety, seasonal depression. The lack of sunlight actually brings a darkness into their life that happens no other time of the year. And experiencing depression, anxiety, and grief can all seem like dark clouds that close in on you. What may even start out as a small cloud becomes a full-on storm or a thickly enveloping fog. Sometimes the darkness comes simply because we've made some poor choices in our life, and we bring the darkness and the silence. And any of those things can cast a deep shadow on our lives. They can bring a silence that is uncomfortable, that makes you feel alone and isolated. And as Susie spoke of in the reading this morning, they can leave us without visible landmarks, cause us to lose our bearings, make it difficult to navigate. We can become like Eeyore, the people for whom the glass is always only half empty or half full. We become depressed, we become discouraged, we see no light around us, even if there is any. Or what does that have to do with the Christmas season? There's a cheery way to begin the service, huh? Darkness, gloom, Eeyore. Well, what does that have to do with Christmas? Well, we are not very much different than those who are waiting for the first Christmas. You see, in the space between the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, and the New Testament, the second half, we find God's people have been existing in 400 or so years of the darkness of captivity. They have been under the oppression of foreign rulers. They have been under the weight of heavy taxation, all the kinds of things that produce darkness in our life. Not only that, between the last recorded word of the first half of the Bible and the first recorded words that we have in the New Testament, God himself has actually been silent with his people, not a single word. We are not much different. They had little hope. They could see no way out, no light at the end of the tunnel. They heard no voice calling to them out of the darkness. And perhaps that is where you find yourself today. Perhaps you know people who find themselves in that place today, desperate for hope. Duan Young says this: hopelessness may be the saddest words in our language. Despair is the enemy of our soul. It can paralyze us, halt our progress, and cause us to lose our way. But hope awakens us like the light shining in the darkness. And all throughout this month, church, I want us to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the light has come. Hope has come. It came on that first Christmas, and it comes to us every time that we cry out to Jesus himself. Hope has come. There is good news. Hear the word of the prophet Isaiah. He says in Isaiah chapter 62, the first two verses, these words: "For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent." They were lost, looking for hope, stuck in the silence, and Isaiah says, I will not be silent, because he is speaking the words of the Lord. He says, for Jerusalem's sake, I will not keep quiet. And what is the message that he wants to say? Until her righteousness goes forth like brightness, and her salvation like a torch that is burning. They were lost in darkness, and Isaiah says there is a light that is coming for your salvation. And verse 2 says, the nations will see your righteousness, and all kings your glory, and you'll be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will designate. There is a light that is coming. Isaiah chapter 60, we hear these words. Then Isaiah says, arise and shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and a deep darkness the people. But the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. And then from chapter 9, these words, the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those living in a dark land, the light will shine on them. Verse 6, for a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. For the zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. Father, take words that perhaps are very familiar to us who have journeyed in the faith for any length of time and have celebrated many Christmases. But Lord, would you take these words afresh and new and cause the light of your word to shine into the darkness that we experience in this life, Lord. And may we today find fresh hope in the coming of your Son, Jesus Christ. And we ask these things in your name. Amen. Hope has come into the darkness. And the writer here, Isaiah, is not just talking about a little bit of a funk. He is not just talking about, as Elvis would say, having just a little bit of a blue Christmas. Isaiah says that light has come into deep darkness, into a dark land, into those who are living in the shadow of death. Into that darkness, not only in the first Christmas, but into the darkness of our lives, Isaiah speaks words of hope. Think about the language that he uses, this contrast of light and dark, and he refers to the coming of the light as the rising sun, the very glory of God rising upon those who hear the word. In fact, he says, arise and shine, and that word means to stand up, to get ready, take heart, for there is reason to have hope, not only for those who heard it in Isaiah's day, but for us as well. Take heart. Hope has come. But hope isn't simply a feeling that you and I have. Hope is actually a person. Hope is a person. The one promised by the prophet Isaiah is the very babe that was born in the manger in Bethlehem. For in the coming of Jesus, God not only breaks the silence of the speaking word, but he shatters the darkness of the world in which they were living. So let's listen to these words that Isaiah speaks to us about the hope that is found in Jesus Christ. I love the analogy that I had Susie read for us about a lighthouse, about a searchlight. Because if you can imagine yourself out on the sea at night and there is no light around, you have no idea where you are, and then sweeping across the sky is the bright beam of that searchlight from the lighthouse. I believe that's how the prophet's words sweep across us today. He says that the one coming will be a wonderful counselor. I don't know about you, but I've been in seasons where grief and anxiety and confusion have darkened my way. To know that there is one who can give me the kind of counsel that will put me back on the right path, it's a wonderful thing to experience. He brings counsel and comfort, and Isaiah says it's not just okay counsel, it is wonderful counsel. Jesus comes to speak words of encouragement to us. He comes to speak words of value, and you heard your teens talk about that. It was a part of OSYC. The world speaks all kinds of words to us, says all kinds of things to us, says, this is who you are. But God, as the wonderful counselor in his Son, Jesus Christ, comes to speak words of value to you and to I. So when the cares of life, when the anxiety, the depression, the worry and the care of this life beat down on us, weigh down on us, when the cloud comes in and says, you're no good, the wonderful counselor comes and says, you are loved. I value you. I am here for you. He comes as the wonderful counselor. Isaiah also says that the one coming is mighty God. He is not just someone who can do a little bit for you, but he is the one who possesses all power. You would not want me endeavoring to try and lift weights over 300 pounds. That would not be in my skill set. I could lift maybe 150, 200 pounds. But if you want somebody to do that kind of heavy lifting, we needed George, who's homesick today. You need somebody who has the power to do it. When we find ourselves in the cloud of darkness, when we find ourselves stuck in the midst of hopelessness, we don't want somebody who can just come and help us a little bit. We need someone who can help us with all the power that he possesses. Isaiah, in that chapter 60, he uses the word the Lord. The glory of the Lord is going to rise upon you. And the words that he is using there for the Lord is the one who is the self-existent one, the eternal one, the all-powerful one. The hope that we have this Christmas is that in Jesus' coming, he has everything that you and I need. Sometimes the darkness is such that we barely have the strength to get out of bed. And God says to us in the coming of his Son, do not fear. Do not worry. Take hope. I will give you the strength to go forth from this place. He is greater than any problem that you face. And as the well-known song says, he has the whole world in his hands. Isaiah also says that the one coming is the eternal or everlasting Father. And let's just take those two words for a moment. Eternal. 20-some years ago, my father went home to be with the Lord. My father does not live on in this earthly life. He passed from this life. The hope of Jesus Christ, the hope of the Christmas season, is that the one who is coming will never go away. He is the eternal one. He will never lose his value. He will never make a mistake. He will never get tired. He will never quit. He is the eternal one. Take hope. But he is also Father. To the isolated and the alone, the one coming brings hope because he embraces into family. He says, welcome, my child. I am here for you, my child. It was a part of the radical ministry of Jesus when he was teaching his followers to pray. And he says, our Father. And it's the word Abba, Daddy. He is our eternal Father. There is hope today. No matter how messed up your family may have been in this life, God says in the coming of Jesus, I will bring you into a family that knows no dysfunction, that is whole, that is well. Jesus spoke of the prodigal child. In that parable of the prodigal son, he shares that image of the father, that when the son is afar off, the father runs to meet him. The hope that we have this Christmas is we have an eternal, never-ending Father who runs to embrace us, irregardless of how far we have wandered from him. There is hope today. Twice in Isaiah 9, the prophet speaks of government, authority, and rule. Speaks of him as the Prince of Peace. We can look around our world today. We can even look at our own country and recognize that there is a lot of dysfunction in what we call government and those who are intended to rule over us and lead us. Apart from the rule and authority of God, all human efforts will end in disorder and chaos. Their best efforts will never be as God's. Storms may rage, the wind, the waves may blow, but he says to us today, I come as the Prince of Peace. I speak peace over you. When you are unable to make sense of the things of your life, to keep order in your life, to find it under your own control. In the last couple weeks, I love a meme that I saw circulated on the internet that this person was saying that they run a very tight shipwreck. We love to think that we have life under control. And I can tell you out of my own personal experience, I've said this to you on several occasions before, but in the height of the ugliness of my perfectionist tendencies, I felt like I had control of everything in my life. But the sad reality is I had control of absolutely nothing in my life, because the slightest thing would be a chink in the armor. The slightest bump on the road would knock the mask off, and life was out of my control. But there is hope in this Christmas season. There is hope in the coming of Jesus Christ, because there is the one whose government will know no end. In fact, not only will it never end, it will increase in its power and its rule and authority, because it is ruled over by the one who is the King and the Prince of Peace. If you are looking for peace in your life, you will never find it apart from Jesus Christ. You can chase after everything that you can imagine. You can chase after wealth. You can chase after your own power. You can chase after possessions. You can chase after it in love and relationships, but it will never, ever bring you peace. The only peace that you will find is in Jesus Christ, and we can take hope today because hope has come in the Prince of Peace. But there's another important aspect of this peace that I do not want to leave out. It's not just peace in the stuff of everyday life that we need. Surely Jesus brings that to us. But the most important peace that Jesus came to bring, it's the most important hope that we can speak of this Christmas, is peace with God. The first listeners to Isaiah's prophecy, those living in the land of Israel at the time of Jesus' birth, were hungry for their Messiah. They were looking for one who would simply swoop in and bring a new rule and reign, kick out the oppressors of Rome, and give them their own kingdom. But God, in His infinite wisdom, says, no, the Messiah that you need, the Messiah that you and I need, is the one who can deal with the peace that needs to come in this issue of our sin. For all of us, apart from Jesus Christ, are cut off from God's presence. We cannot hear His voice. We are lost in the darkness of our own sin, and we need peace with God. And Jesus comes to bring that peace. It is the greatest hope of all. On our own, there is no hope. There is no remedy for the problem of our sin. There is no way for you and I to bridge that gap. We can try and do all of the right things. We can try and live a good enough life, but the only hope that we have is in Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus, the hope of our salvation, indeed the hope of the world. Jesus Himself said in John chapter 12, I come as the light of the world, so that people do not have to remain in darkness. If we will believe in Jesus Christ, if we will accept His saving, redeeming work on our behalf, we no longer have to live in the darkness of our sin, but we can enter into the light that is Jesus Christ. So just a few more things from our text as I wrap up and before I close. How do we embrace hope this Christmas? These are words that are not as explicit in the text today, but they are no less there. God spoke these words to the prophet Isaiah hundreds and hundreds of years before they ever came to be. Why is that important? Well, the text tells us that even in the long night of their silence, even in the long night of your silence and of mine, even in the long darkness that we experience, help was and help is on the way. God, in the words of Isaiah, was telling His people, and He is telling us today, that He has not forgotten us. He has not forsaken us. Hope has come. As it was then, so it is now. God was and God is faithful to His promised deliverance. He is working in you. He is working around you. He is endeavoring to draw you to Himself, and He will work to strengthen your faith. He's already worked the greatest work in sending His Son, Jesus Christ. We can trust Him for the things of every day. So here's some closing challenges for you. The first of which is this: if you have never entered into a relationship with Jesus Christ, if you have never known the light that comes in Jesus Christ, I want to invite you today to come to that light. There is no darkness of your life, no darkness of your experience, no darkness of your wayward and hard heart against the things of God, the light of Jesus Christ cannot illuminate, cannot break in on. The light may not erase every mistake that you've ever made, but the light will change your perspective. God will be at work making you whole. Christ was born, I believe, into the mess of a stable in the manger to remind us that there is not a single mess that we can make of our lives that the light of Jesus Christ does not speak into. He says, I am willing to step into the very mess that you've made to make it into a miracle, to make it into something that is majestic, something that is a symbol of hope. And so I invite you today to reach out to the Jesus and to receive the hope that he has. And if you want to do that today and you want to come and to pray, I'd love to gather around you. I know Pastor Allen would love to do the same and pray about how you can receive the hope of Jesus Christ. But I have a challenge for those that already know the hope that we celebrate this Christmas. Advent is a time when each one of us can allow Christ to be born in fresh, new ways in our lives. Maybe you've allowed some shadows to creep across your heart. Maybe you've allowed the rush and the crush of the season to weigh you down. Advent is a time where you can say, Jesus, be born fresh and new in me. Help me to have the same joy that I had the first time. Help me to have it this season. And then here's the second challenge for us that know Jesus. 1 Peter writing to the church says this, that we are a people who have been called out of darkness. We've been called out of darkness into his marvelous light. And not only have we been called to that place, but we're supposed to go forth and declare the praises of the one who called us from darkness to light. Church, there is no better season for us, perhaps, to share with other people of the hope that we have in Jesus Christ than at Christmas time. In fact, elsewhere in the New Testament, it says that we're to be ready at any moment to give a reason for the hope that is within us. Church, we have the greatest news that anyone can ever hear. Hope has come. It's come in the person of Jesus Christ. Who are you and I going to share that hope with this Christmas? And if the answer to that is, well, you know what? I'm not sure I know anybody that I can share that hope with, then I say to you, and I would say to myself, shame on us. If we have so isolated ourselves from people who need to know Jesus Christ, shame on us. We have never been called to step away from the lost, but we have been called, just as Jesus did, to enter into the mess that is our world and proclaim the hope of Jesus Christ. Who will you share that hope with? Who will I share it with in the coming weeks? Who can you give a card to and say, come, experience the hope of Jesus Christ? Are you ready at any moment to give a reason for the hope that is within you? And maybe you just want to come today, church, and maybe you want to come and pray, God, change my heart. Help me to go forth from this Sunday ready to carry the light into the world in which I live. And maybe you just want to come and pray about that today. So would you stand with me, and we're going to pray together, and then Mandy's going to lead us in a song. Father, may you work in our hearts today. May you, Lord, embed within us this incredible truth that hope has come in the coming of your Son that first time. But Lord, hope is always available to us in Jesus Christ as we reach out to you and as we receive you into our hearts. All it takes is to turn our eye to you. Lord, would you pierce through the darkness? Would you come through the silence of our lives, Lord? And would you work a work in us today? God, if there is someone in this room that has never experienced the hope of Jesus Christ, I pray that this would be the day, Lord, that you would draw them to yourself, that they would encounter the incredible light that is your Son, Jesus Christ, a light that dispels every ounce of darkness. And Lord, for your church today, and I include myself in this prayer, Lord God, would you work in us so that we would indeed be beacons of the light of Jesus Christ, that we would be carriers of the good news, that we, just like the shepherds did, that we would go and tell what we have experienced in you. So, Lord, would you work in hearts today, I pray, and I ask these things in your name. Amen.